Beautiful people, hope you're doing well. My name is Lawrence Ray, also known as LRW3, the host of the Talk to Me Nice podcast. And I don't like to make clickbait videos, so we're going to jump right into it. To be straightforward, I don't know if you should get a credit card or not. What I'm here to do today is just to give you information related to credit cards to help you better make your own decision. I'm kind of in the middle ground as far as credit cards go. I know some people really enjoy them. They think they're the best thing ever, and some people despise them. I'm kind of in the middle where I acknowledge credit cards can be a good tool if used correctly. But if used incorrectly, it can get you in a lot of trouble. So I'm just going to give some information I learned over the years. To be clear, I'm not a financial advisor. If you need professional help, like I always say, contact a professional in your area. I'm just giving out things I learned over the years, just dealing with my own personal situations or just going through life. Before we really get started, let me start by saying credit cards by themselves are not a bad thing. Like anything else in the world, though, they do provide an avenue that could lead you into less than ideal circumstances if used incorrectly. For those who fear the danger of credit cards for certain reasons, I'm going to do my best to acknowledge some of those right now. Now, the first drawback I will acknowledge when it comes to credit cards is the temptation to overspend. Studies show consumers spend more when they pay with credit cards, sometimes even twice as much. It's the same reason things like Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, things like that works. It presents the opportunity to get what you want now without the pain of cash leaving your wallet immediately. Now, this is very valid, and for clear transparency, I do it too. People who know me can attest that very rarely will you see me just use my debit card. I will use a credit card instead, and I've never had much of an issue with that. Now, again, these programs by themselves are not inherently bad. The issue most people run into is related to overspending. This is where strong self-accountability is mandatory. Even if you have a high credit card with a high limit and you want to make a purchase that isn't anywhere near that limit, if that purchase leaves you without the ability to pay it back, you can't do it. So if you plan to use a credit card, you must set a personal spending limit. I myself, I don't buy anything on credit that I don't have the money for already. I do that because it allows me to keep the flexibility of having the cash a little bit longer in my pocket in case something unforeseen occurs while still getting the product. And if for whatever reason I need to use the credit card for something bigger, I can pay that balance off in full and not compound debt that maybe I couldn't afford to pay back later. So my advice is, until you find what works best for you, use it like a debit card. Basically, if you can't buy it in cash, don't buy it on credit. So the second major drawback I hear in regards to credit cards is interest makes it harder to pay off the balance. Now, me personally, I don't pay interest. The reason I don't pay interest is directly related to my first answer, because I don't overspend. Here's a secret in case you didn't know. Credit card companies want to make money. Shocking, I know. But they do that with providing you the opportunity to get what you want now and tell you, hey, just pay me back over time. And for me, willing to wait to get my money back, I'll just charge you a little extra for that convenience. Now, what they don't tell you, though, is that little extra they said is about 16.44% for 2022. That's not a little at all, depending on what exactly you purchased and the price that you purchased it at. And that's just the average. So, of course, there may be some lower, but the more important part of that is there are some a lot higher. Now, you might have just heard 16.44% and was like, man, that can't be legal to be charging people unreasonably high rates. And to that I say, well, not really, but kinda. There are things in place to try to limit the interest rates. For those who are unaware, usury laws are regulations governing the amount of interest that can be charged on a loan. Basically, each state is supposed to cap the maximum amount of how much interest can be charged. But in most states, a written contract can override that maximum. So basically, even if they're only supposed to charge you, let's say 18% in South Carolina, if they put it in writing that they want you to do 26% and you sign off on that, you just superseded your right to a cap rate. So that's why it's important to, one, learn the laws in your state, and then two, read your contract paperwork before you just agree to it. Now, if you already find yourself in debt, there are different avenues and programs available to try to repay it back quicker. That could be a separate video in itself if requested, but the main thing to avoid, if possible, is paying the minimum. Now, please don't get me wrong. If all you can afford to do is pay the minimum, by all means, do that. Something is better than nothing, but realistically speaking, if that's all you can do, you are in for a long road. Let me just give an example for people who maybe don't understand how minimum payments work and how long it will actually take you to pay it off if you're just paying the minimum. For example, A minimum payment on a 10K debt with a 15% interest rate will take you just under 28 years to pay that debt off, and you'll pay about $12,000 in interest. And you may be like, man, that's because it's $10,000. Cool. Well, let's say a $2,000 debt at an 18% interest rate, and you're just paying the minimum, which is around 2% or a balance of about $10, would take you 370 months or just under 30 years to pay off. So big or small, the minimum is never what you should be looking to do. All that does is leave you in good standing with the company, but it doesn't further you much in repaying the debt. So for my people already in credit card debt, looking for ways to try to get that repaid, 5 quick ways to tackle your credit card debt. 1, make an extra payment each month. Again, interest is only charged once a month on the balance reflected. So the easiest way to lower the interest you have to pay back is to lower the balance that you're paying interest back on. Even if you can't make a additional payment itself, just pay something, because once you pay that interest for that month, anything else above that goes to the principal. So that's the first way you could try to tackle that debt. The second way to try to lower your credit card debt is to get a balance transfer card with a lower interest rate. Now, to be straightforward, this is not ideal. But when you get to the point where you're between a rock and a hard place, you got to be honest with yourself that you're going to be paying interest. So at that point, the goal should switch to, let me just pay as little interest as possible. And you do that by lowering the interest rate. So again, this is not ideal, but if you're already in that position, look to try to cut your losses as best as possible. 3 is just map out a repayment plan yourself. You could do that by Googling like a debt snowball and just put something together on your own as far as your plan to attack your debt. And most importantly, stick to it, because it doesn't matter if you make a plan if you don't follow it. Number 4, reduce spending and tighten your budget. Again, this is kind of self-explanatory. The less money going out allows more money to be put back into the pot to try to pay these debts off. And number 5, if you're just over your head and you don't know what to do, there are credit consulting services. There are professionals who is their job to help you out and try to get you back on the right path. So if you're just over your head, nothing wrong with calling in a professional. Again, as I said from the beginning, I'm in the middle when it comes to credit cards. I think they are an excellent tool if used correctly, but as we just discussed, as you see, they can get you in some trouble if used wrong. But for those who are looking to get a credit card, I'm going to discuss as far as different type of cards that you can get, as well as important things that maybe you should know when you're starting your credit card journey. The first thing we're going to discuss is the different type of cards available to you. The first card that most people will start at is a secured card. Now, most credit cards that you'll get are unsecured, meaning that you don't have to put anything down to get the card. But for people who are either just starting their credit journey or are repairing their credit after, maybe a hardship or something, this is likely where you'll start at with a secured card. Now, to give some backstory, I myself started with a secured credit card. So, there's nothing wrong with that if you're beginning your journey. How it works is, in a simple explanation, is you give the credit card company X amount up front, and that amount you give them is used as collateral for a credit card. For me, I had a Wells Fargo secured credit card years ago. I think the minimum at that time might have been like $300. So basically, I gave them $300, and in return of that $300, they sent me a secured credit card with a $300 limit. So if I wanted to raise my limit, it was simple. I just sent them more money in. But I still paid that card every month like you would a normal credit card. So even though I gave them the $300, if I spent money on that card, I still had to make a payment each month. This card is basically a safe way for the companies to test your credit worthiness. And most secure cards monitor how well you pay these cards back. And usually within 6 months to a year, with good payment history, they will change your secure card to an unsecured card. So that $300 you sent in the beginning will be sent back with you, sent back to you, excuse me. And you will now have a credit card with no collateral attached to it. So if you're looking to get into credit cards, this is likely going to be everybody's starting point. Once you move past these secured cards, there are thousands of unsecured card options that you can choose from. Things like reward cards, cashback cards, travel credit cards. Me, personally, I like cashback cards. I have an American Express and a Capital One card that I enjoy. But again, find what works best for you or figure out what's important to you in a credit card and then, choose that option. Now, something important that I got asked, which I do feel like is something maybe to think about because it is an option you can choose as well. My least favorite type of credit card are store-based credit cards. Now, first off, before we even get into this, please do not let every random store pull your credit just to get that 20% discount off at the register or whatever they're offering you. In all honesty, it's really not worth a bunch of random hard pulls to lower your score just to save a couple of dollars there. So if at all possible, especially if you don't want a card from that store, do not let them pull your credit. My major concern, though, when it comes to store-based credit cards is they offer very limited use versus a generically backed card like a Visa or MasterCard, as those cards can be used basically anywhere. Now, getting a store-based card only really allows you to use that card at that store, which is awesome, until you need to go somewhere else. A generic back card can give you the option to shop at that store plus any other store you may need to go to. If you get a store card, you would likely still need to get an additional card, likely a generically backed card, to make up for that loss of flexibility. And if you have to get more cards regardless, why not just get the generically backed card in the first place, would be my opinion on that. Another quick thing I'm going to tackle real quick is the statement date versus the due date. This is very easy to confuse. All credit cards have a payment due date. It's the date that usually falls the same exact day each month to make sure you know when you're supposed to pay that company. And if you pay at least the minimum on this day, your account will be in good standing, which is good. Don't get me wrong. But what's important to know as well is your card statement date, which is usually at least a few days after that due date. For example, I think my due date for Capital One is the 16th, and the statement date is usually like the 18th or the 19th. So let's say I submit a payment on the 16th for the full balance. So on the 16th, I have a zero balance. On the 17th, I decide I need to go spend $500 on the card. If my statement date is on the 18th, what I learned over time, like I said, most of my stuff I learned was from experience over time. What I learned over time is the balance on the statement date is what will report to your credit bureaus, not the due date balance, which is important because if you're someone who is on the edge of high credit utilization, the difference of a few days could put you over where you want to be in regards to how it's impacting your FICO score. Now, I don't really want to overwhelm in one video, so I'm going to wrap this one up. But basically, I'm going to end it with explaining why what I just stated is important and how it directly impacts your FICO score. Now, FICO is made up of 5 factors and assigned a percentage for each one. Payment history is 35%. So know your due date. Make sure the payment isn't late. Credit utilization is 30%. So know your statement date. Don't add a balance you didn't expect and raise this number. The ideal utilization is between 10 to 30% of all available credit. So let's just say you had $100 available to you in credit. To be in the what's considered a good range for utilization, you would be $30 or under on your $100 available to you in credit. Other things as far as the FICO is credit history is 15%, credit mix is 10%, and credit inquiries are another 10%. So that goes back to, again, the store-based cards. Don't go to every store and let them pull your credit just to get a discount at the register, because that's going to keep hitting your score and that's going to keep lowering your score if you keep having random inquiries. So don't just have people pulling it if there's no real reason. Again, I'm not trying to tell you one way or the other. If you do want to go get that store-based card, just go to that store and let them pull your credit. Don't go to random stores to let them do the same. My name is Lawrence Ray. Of course, we'll go more in depth in the next video. I just wanted to start people off by first acknowledging the issues many people have with credit, and then starting us off with just what type of credit cards are good or what should we be looking for. And mainly, like I said, know your statement date so it doesn't impact your credit in a negative way. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate your patience and your time, and we'll be back with you to teach you a couple more things related to credit shortly.